I want to welcome you all today to the Texas Co-Requisite Project Learning Series, also co-hosted by the Texas Success Center. And we are going to continue for a few more weeks to have some webinars on different topics. And thank you all for joining today, and thank you all for who have joined some of our other webinars also. And we have most of the videos for the webinars posted on our website, the Texas Co-Requisite Project. And I will put in the chat my email if you have not been on the listserv and you want to be added to the listserv. It's creed@austincc.edu. And today is going to be a great topic for all of us. It's about creating effective learning environments at a distance. And we are all dealing with virtual learning at the moment and for an unforeseen time in the future. And today we have Paula Talley as Manager of Professional Learning for Higher Ed at the Charles A. Dana Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Paula Talley provides leadership and oversight of the professional learning tools, products, and services for the Dana Center Math Pathways, a transformative redesign to modernize entry-level college math programs through working with states, systems, and institutions. In this role, she develops tools and services that support local leaders and works with external organizations to coordinate and mobilize Math Pathways efforts, including course redesign, co-requisite supports, and pedagogy. Paula has over 20 years of teaching experience at the secondary and post-secondary levels. So I'm going to hand it over to Paula. And thank you all again.
Thank you, Carolyn. And one thing that I didn't put on there, I'm also an adjunct math instructor for Austin Community College. And I know it's noted everywhere, math, but we do support things beyond math, such as this webinar, looking at creating effective learning environments at a distance. I'm going to put the teacher hat on now, just to give you a heads up. I was on a 2-hour call this morning with Connecticut, and my internet blinked 5 different times, and I finally had to call in. So the teacher role in me, I guess I can actually turn my video on. The teacher role in me says, if I freeze or I disappear, do not fret. Christy's on the line. She'll send you into breakouts. You are actually probably, the experts in this environment just as much as I am. So I want you to take the opportunity to learn from each other. This is going to be an interactive webinar where we actually are going to go into a couple of different breakouts. But if something happens and I do disappear, don't get off the line. Take the opportunity to learn and connect with your colleagues. If you have not typed it in the chat yet, please type your college and your role. I see a mixture of math and English folks on this call, and and this is actually a topic for all areas, but we're specifically focusing on co-recs. Just you're experts at Zoom by now, but just a quick reminder of the virtual norms. Keep your audio muted. If you want to raise your hand, or if you want to rename yourself, click on the participant list at the bottom of your screen, and you can actually rename yourself or raise your hand to ask a question. I want to use the chat a lot. Again, I'm bringing the research to you and I'm facilitating the conversation, but you are doing some amazing things in your classroom, and we'll save the chat so you can share it or you can go back and look at it. So I'm going to rely on you to use the chat quite a bit. Some people, it's distracting to have the chat. So if it is distracting, just keep it down and don't look at it. Others love to be actively involved in the chat, but it's a great place to go and mine for some of the things that are shared. In your breakouts, it's very helpful if you actually start your video so you can see who you're talking to. I know there's some instances where you may not have a video, or you have bad Wi-Fi, and mine, I can't even click it to turn on right now. I'll click when y'all go to a breakout, I'll try to mess with it, but I don't want to mess with it right now. And then actually it says minimize background distractions, but right now those are actually really fun. You can't see me right now, but I have 2 dogs in my lap and 1 on the ground because there is lightning nearby here in North Georgetown. It shows us thunderstorm's going to be coming through soon. Hopefully we actually get some much needed rain. But backgrounds, no backgrounds, it's all fun. Just make sure you are presentable with your backgrounds. Group norms, everybody here has expertise. When you go to your breakout rooms, make sure you share that talk time because everybody has some things to add. Our objectives for the session, this is pretty ambitious for a 90-minute webinar, but I just want to give you an idea of some strategies and resources available for you and your department. And hopefully you can walk away with a couple of good ideas here, but we're going to be sharing a lot of strategies and some research around learning in a virtual environment. So here's an icebreaker, and I have to say that I actually did this in a meeting. I didn't do it. Somebody, Amy Clymer, thanks to Christy Short, I was able to sign up for one of her courses, and she said she stole this from somebody else, this activity at the beginning, and it was very energizing. So you're going to physically get up and move. I cannot see anyone right now because my screens are inundated because I'm actually sharing my screen. But I want you to think about something in your house that symbolizes you. I'm going to give you 60 seconds. I'm going to time it. And you're going to have 60 seconds to go grab that something that symbolizes you and bring it back. So when I say go, you're going to get up and take off and go. So go. Go to the breakouts without the instructions. So hopefully you saw the green note pop up there. So the purpose of what I wanted you to do in the breakout is do just a quick introduction. What object did you choose and why? And the reason for this, and that last activity, I can't see you. When we've done this before, people actually jumped up and moved. If you think about students so often, and even people, so often they're just sitting there and actually getting up and doing like a quick icebreaker at the beginning to get them energized or a little stressed, like, oh no, I got to go find something. Then it also gave you an interesting way to get to know the members of your group. So here's some of the benefits. This is from Lansing Community College. These are some of the benefits of icebreakers. You know, it reduces both the instructor and student anxiety prior to introducing the course. So maybe this is something you could do on the first day. It fosters a powerful way for both the student-to-student interaction. So you're in your group, so hopefully you got to know your colleagues. And the faculty to student. It actually creates an environment right off the bat where they know that participants or your students are expected to participate and that the instructor is willing to listen. When I did on my first day of classes, I didn't make them get up and run because I actually just learned this activity, which I thought was pretty neat. But I had them go to a breakout and just share some things about themselves and find a commonality and then come back to the whole group, and it helped me get that understanding. So listening, we have a large group here, so it's harder to do a share out for this particular activity, but listening to those share outs, it shows that the instructor is willing to actually listen, actively engages those students from the beginning. It conveys that you actually care about getting to know them. It's specifically about getting to know them. And then it helps them form those relationships early on. I want to point out that there's going to be at the end of the slide deck, you're going to get the slide deck. There's a list of resources. So there's a whole lot more. There's a URL at the end that has a whole lot more icebreakers. And many of you probably do icebreakers in your own class. So this is where I want you in your chat as we go along, as you have strategies that you have done in your class, I want you to share those. If you've done great icebreakers, share them in the chat so folks can come back and mine these later. And you will go into another breakout later where you can probably talk about some additional ideas. I want to start with tools in this section. With this shift to virtual environment, as my dogs are moving on my lap, people have tended to lean towards the tools available and not think about the consequences or the or what that actually means to choose a tool in the virtual environment. So if you look at this quote, it's easy to look around a college campus and think that there's no digital divide here. Notice the typewriter there. But the divide has shifted from one technology access to one of technology maintenance. So and these issues are actually many more amplified for students of color or students from low income families. And college students who are older have less reliable technology, have lower grades and lower stress level, higher stress levels. So when you add that technology piece, that adds a layer of learning that the students have to overcome. So not only are they thinking about the content in the course, they are thinking about the technology they have to use to get the coursework done. And the authors here listed that these are some of the differences and outcomes because students who've been underserved in the past, they're less likely, when you get into a lot of the cultural aspects, they're less likely to reach out for help. They're less likely to ask for an extension on a homework assignment or a quiz or something. Because in the past, they've learned that they've been doubted, and they don't want to set themselves up for rejection. So this is from some of the research out there. So really think about the tools that you're using in your class. So BYOT, bring your own technology. So this is a brief list, and there are many factors related to this digital divide. In the past, I know faculty who banned the use of cell phones in classes. And now this last spring, that was the only mode that many students were able to engage in their courses. So you're rethinking the technology. Students who use computers on campus, they have to now find these equal alternatives at home. Older students who are not digital natives, and then also your younger students. Many of the younger students don't know how to use their digital skills for academic purposes. They know it for everything else, but they actually lack the academic purposes. If their cell phone plans are limited, if they break their phone, can they afford to replace it? How long is it going to take? All these, what are their alternatives? What can you do as you're thinking through these classes? And it's not just students. That's one of the advantages of working at the Dana Center that I love, is I get to work with institutions and faculty around the country. And there are many faculty who are caught in these same situations with this shift to virtual last spring. They would go to a parking lot to get Wi-Fi. Students and faculty alike didn't have webcams, microphones, printers. I know even this summer, even using Blackboard Collaborate, one of my students had a computer that was so old she couldn't even participate in Blackboard Collaborate. So luckily ACC had a program where they can loan out the iPad. So I gave her that information and she went and got an iPad so she can actually complete her course. So you have to think about these machine differences, the laptops, the tablets, cell phone use, no or outdated machines, slow internet, no webcam. In my class, I use the chat feature a lot because some of them don't even have microphones, but you want them to actively engage. They might not have printers. And thinking about class itself, they might not have that private area to join synchronously. All these considerations we have to keep in mind when we're doing our classes. So some top level considerations, and I'm going to see if I can post this link. And I encourage you to also share your own stories in the chat. So please use the chat to share your own stories about yourself or your students. Let me see if I can copy this. So some top considerations for technology is thinking about how much does it actually cost for the instructors or for the students? What are you asking of them? Does it actually work on their smartphone, and how well? I encourage you, when you use technology or even your LMS, use your smartphone to see how it displays, to see if there's things that you need to go back and correct or fix, or add some more support to. Does it meet accessibility requirements? There are so many with this shift to virtual. I received so many free offers of all these tools out there, all these services that these vendors are providing for free right now. But you need to think about, first of all, accessibility. Is it sustainable? And they're going to eventually go away. Adding that cost piece, all these bells and whistles on some of these tools, they're trying to rope you in. Part of it's marketing. They're trying to rope you in so you'll continue using their tools. But when it's no longer free, how is that going to be doable? And is that going to add an extra layer to you? And again, making sure everything actually embeds into your LMS. And let me see, this was actually out of, I think it was the Inside Higher Ed, or maybe the Chronicle for Higher Ed. Here's a link of a spreadsheet of a bunch of tools out there. Some are free, some are cost, but it was a nice list of just knowing what's out there and what's available. I don't know if they're keeping it vetted or updated, but I just wanted to just share that with you in case you wanted to go and explore. But check with your campus too, what supports they have with any of this and how they can support you and help support the students. So tools aside, we could have a whole long conversation with tools. We really want to talk about the student engagement and instruction in the classroom. So these are 7 good practices. These were in, again, the research is at the back, Chickern and Gamson. So these are some of the best practices in undergraduate education from their research. Encourages contacts between students and faculty. Develops that collaboration with the students, active learning techniques, give prompt feedback. Does all this sound familiar? Emphasize time on task, communicate high expectation, respect the diverse talents in your classroom. This is even more critical when we think about the online environment. In the online environment, we can increase the students' feeling of isolation. So we need to be supportive. We need to be flexible. We need to reach students where they are, asynchronously or synchronously when appropriate and available. And we need to provide them the support and try to keep things in your course, the tools you use, the setup of your course, try to keep it simple so you're not adding that extra level of anxiety for the students. Now this, it's kind of fun to look back to the research. This research, if you note down there, was from 1999. The authors originally developed this framework. They noted that, I'm going to read a quote here, the use of computer-mediated communication, CMC, is becoming increasingly common in higher education. Obviously right now it is. While those who are leading the development of this new medium are convinced of its potential, its effects on the quality of learning process and its outcomes have not been well studied. So back from 1999, they started studying this community of inquiry in this virtual environment. And now 20 years down the road, the COI framework has been studied, it's been validated, it has been vetted. There's a lot of research around this, and you've probably seen, some of you might have had many, been on many webinars or read many articles where they reference this research from 20 years ago. It is still relevant, and it is still the framework that serves as a foundation that we're going to talk more about in this session. So when you start to design your class as faculty, we have, I'm like the teacher and I want to point at my screen. I guess I can do my mouse over here. Our instinct is we might actually focus on the cognitive presence or selecting the content that tends to be top of mind for us. But the research shows that it's really important for students that you address all of these: social, cognitive, and teaching presence. And we're going to address some of these and share just a few ideas here. And I like that the chats, I'm not really reading the chat totally, but I like that the chat's going because as we're going, continue talking with each other and sharing ideas. So Garrison, he's careful to mention that all 3 of these aspects in the teaching presence, you have your design organization, facilitating discourse. So when you actually dig into his research, he talks about this, in direct instruction. Top of mind for faculty is we have to think about that assessment piece. So what are the ways of each of these aspects of the teaching and presence do we actually include assessment? I'm just going to give you a couple of examples, and I want you to use the chat to share other examples. So design, that's actually planning for assessment. How do you design for assessment? Facilitating discourse. How do you do that continual assessment of what you hear as your students discuss what's going on? Direct instruction. as you're doing direct instruction? Are you assessing the students' questions and responses? So notice assessment is over all of those three aspects. It's not just about, assessment's not just about 2 or 3 or 4 major exams. As we're on this online and actually in person class too, we need to continually be assessing what students are learning and then making those instructional moves to deepen and to redirect that learning. And just a quick note here before I go to the next page. When we think about that teaching presence, we have to make sure our assessment is purposeful. So this is Flower Darby. By the way, I have it right here. That's one of the things I love about the Dana Center is I love to research and learn. So this is Small Teaching Online, a great book. I recommend you get it and read it. She has a ton of amazing strategies in there. But she talks about when you're thinking about the teaching presence, and think about embedding your course design with scaffolded learning and formative assessments. So you're thinking in mind big things. So as you're thinking about their first exam, how am I going to get that work? They're going to have to take a picture of that handwritten work and upload it. So think of a student in an exam situation. They have this heightened level of anxiety about this exam. They have no idea how to upload their homework. And especially if you put it on a time requirement by a certain time, there's a whole nother level of anxiety that adds that pressure to taking that test. So if you're going to do something about uploading your written work from a test, maybe at the beginning, think about how you can scaffold it. Make something that's less intrusive, more formative. Have them upload a photo of their homework problem during week 1. Scaffold it so it's not just all on one big piece of assessment. Assessment and technology together, you're adding that level of stress. So here's another one, and I'm going to let you use the chat feature here. So what if you want to create a video presentation as part of a major project? Again, major project, high anxiety, high stakes. So what can you do on the formative side to scaffold that? So I'm going to let you use the chat here. So what's an idea to scaffold a video intro post? Yeah, video of ourselves. We're going to talk about that in just a minute too. Yep. So I see a few examples here. You know, submit them for review, some small videos, maybe intro videos about themselves, maybe an interesting fact about themselves, or a video explaining a homework problem. And then, so what about this? So what about this next one here? Let me get my mouse back onto this side. So what if you want them to email? Think about a student who's having an issue with technology, and all of a sudden they have this high stakes, I need to get this done, I'm having issues, and they don't know how to email during the LMS. They don't know how to use that. So what's something you could scaffold with that? My dog's answering for you. Make a video, scavenger hunt, LMS features. Yeah, great ideas. Emailed that they understood the syllabus. Yeah, so at the beginning, have something where they're emailing you through their LMS right up the front. Maybe an interesting fact about themselves, the syllabus. I've read the syllabus. Have them connect. That's a good idea. Have them connect with the help desk in the first week, or which is 24 hours a day. So again, trying to think of ways to scaffold some of those issues so it's not so high stakes and stressful in the minute, especially with this virtual environment. So I'm going to move to cognitive presence. So that cognitive presence is enhanced by teachers by providing feedback through multimedia. I think somebody said this in the chat earlier. You know, you're asking a question back, you're reinforcing what's presented. Instead of maybe doing a traditional text feedback in an online discussion, maybe you're doing an audio or a video. You're addressing several different modes of providing that feedback. Encouraging peers to facilitate. Peer facilitation, when you have your students talking together in discussion groups and breakout groups, you are, they're sharing their expert knowledge. You often hear that the students doing the tutoring as the one that learns more, but not only are you helping the students with that student discourse, it also frees the instructor up to focus on what's happening, doing that formative assessment, listening to what's going on there. Your discussion prompts. Some of your discussion prompts can be social, but others might be more directed to progress and phases of the cognitive process. Maybe you have problem-based or project-based prompts, debate-based, debate prompts, or some kind of challenging stances. You know, an example of a problem-based prompt, you will give them a problem that's related to a content area. You ask them to discuss it, work it together, form solutions. You know, it could be most of the time the instructor actually creates it, but in the math class, after the end of a chapter, I've had the students actually create some, you know, some problems that are more in depth and post them in the discussion forum, and then they had to solve each other's and generate the different solutions. So it doesn't always have to be the instructor. The students can actually post too and be in charge of that. Debate prompts, you know, students argue for or against something, trying to persuade somebody to assume that same position. And when they're debating, they're thinking, and it's developing that more sophisticated argument as they're trying to reflect on both sides of the issue. The challenging stance, global warming is good for the environment. Maybe throw that out there. And the instructor takes the challenging stance where the instructor plays the devil's advocate and challenges the student to defend their position, to provide that opposing evidence, and highlight their different opinions. And I want to note it, I didn't put it here, but with discussion prompts in the virtual environment, and actually even in a regular class, if you have discussions, it's a good idea if you, once the discussion prompt is going, at the end, you might, of course, you're checking in throughout the discussion prompt, but when it becomes to the end, the instructor actually go back and summarize, well, I heard so-and-so said this, or this was a good point, or here's where some of the challenging areas that were, that came up, and maybe even do those in an audio format so they can hear you talking about their discussion. So when you're thinking about the assessments, when you're creating these discussion prompts, that also goes back to that assessment piece that we talked about earlier. What are the requirements? What are your expectations for that discussion? And I just talked about the assessments there. So just creating here's some more examples of creating teaching and cognitive presence. You talked about your intro videos. Some of you put that in the chat. Are you providing opportunities for instructor feedback and sharing with students what to expect on that feedback, a timely feedback? Do you have checking in reports with students? Do they do muddiest points in your class? They can even do that in a virtual environment. Sometimes they can even use that in a discussion forum. Actually, you know, the course that I'm teaching, I'm using my math lab. And what's nice with it, I'll do muddiest points in class, but I'll also use the item analysis on the homework and quizzes, and I'll see common problems that they're missing, and I'll do like short, I have a synchronous class, I'll either bring up that in the next class, Or I'll say, I saw many of you miss this, and I'll do like a short video recording and I'll post it and send it to them and say, a lot of you are missing this problem. Let's go through this. So, different ways about how do you do that muddiest point. Talking about the short videos, the research is showing it's really important to chunk, and we'll get to this in the next page. Chunk your recordings. And if you're doing an asynchronous model, have that time that if they're watching your recordings, that they can actually come to some online office hours. I can't think of the names. I've heard some really good names for instead of using online office hours, because that kind of seems intimidating. If you have any good names, type them in the chat, because I can't think of it right now. I know there was one I really liked. I'm going to use it, and then of course I can't remember it right now. So instead of online office hours, what do you call it? So students feel more welcome to come to your office hours. And of course, especially in a virtual environment, if you're asynchronous, synchronous too, but asynchronous, make sure you have the multiple ways that they can contact you in the LMS or through chat or through email, and you actually respond in a timely manner. That's really important if somebody's out there all on their own and looking for that question that they can't find. So here's another good book. It's really geared towards K-12, but there's a lot of good research in it. So in Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, she has some webinars that she posted recently in the virtual environment. But Zaretta Hammond, she describes these 4 macro level instructional strategies that demonstrate rhythm to students' learning. So you have Ignite. So when you're doing your macro lectures, you have to think about this Ignite. You're trying to get their attention. You're chunking it. You're making the information digestible. You're giving them a chance to chew on it. So they're actively processing the information. And then you're having time for them to review so they can actually apply their learning. Well, she emphasizes that each chunk should be about 5 or 7 minutes with one takeaway. I used to be guilty of this when I would do online classes. I would do long lectures over a whole section and expect the students to go back and listen to it. But that's actually not effective. They need quick bursts of learning. Sometimes you've seen, oh, can you put it in the chat? I sure can. And actually it's actually in the references. This book is actually in the back too. But it's Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. So this book, the Small Teaching Online, those references are in the back. But I've seen professors do long recorded lectures, and I've actually done some online trainings where they'll say, pause the video here and practice a little bit. I've been guilty of that too. But if you think about the small chunks in a virtual environment, small chunks are more friendly for mobile devices. They're more friendly for bandwidth. I don't know if you tried to download some of those long videos. Sometimes it's hard, and it's actually more helpful with time management. So the research shows, to record a few mini lectures so they can chunk it rather than one large lecture. And again, you guys have multiple strategies too that you've done in your class that we're going to share in just a minute. I was wondering how to record my lecture. Yeah, so short chunks. And chunking actually comes into play. This is a template. This is another great book about good teaching online, Nielsen and Goodson. So this is a sample course template from Nielsen and Goodson. It's in their book. It's also at the end of the, I'm going to give you so much homework after this. You're going to have to do a lot of reading. That's where your departmental culture comes in. So there's a lot of abundant research. Quality Matters. I just went through a Quality Matters course actually at ACC just a couple of weeks ago. Explicit organization and clearly labeled segments that reduce the student anxiety and help them understand that learning process and actually facilitate their time management piece. And if you have within the content area, keep it chunked, keep a clear, consistent clustering, can't even say it, clustering. If you see right here, I think I have an arrow, there's weekly folders. So assignments are maybe chunked by week. Again, they're learning a little, practicing a little, receiving some feedback, bite-sized segments, so they're not seeing the whole course at one time. Your course is even chunked too. There's some good research around that where you can even chunk your learning management system. And then scaffold in your learning management system. We talked about this a little bit, but those low stake, no risk activities before they actually engage into like test or project. So what we're gonna do right now, because I've been talking nonstop and I gotta put my dog down here because I'm holding her. There's lightning nearby here. It's a little dark, but I'm doing a narrative of the weather. But we're gonna send you to breakouts here in just a minute. And I want you just to focus on that teaching and cognitive presence. Quick introductions if you need to introduce each other. When we come back, we're gonna have just a couple of people. I can't have everybody share out, but we're gonna have a couple of people share out. But I want everybody to choose a reporter, because if you don't share out, I want you to share your ideas out in the chat. Choose a timekeeper. You're gonna have 10 minutes. The person whose name comes first. First name comes last. I can't even read the slide here. And ensure that everybody in your group actually gets a chance to speak. So Christy's gonna send us away for you to reflect with your colleagues for 10 minutes. So Christy, send us away. Oh, there were a couple of questions. I apologize for not doing a great job of explaining teaching and cognitive presence. So teaching presence is basically you showing your presence in the course. Again, cognitive is thinking about that learning that the students are doing. Are they, when we talked about the discussion prompts, the thinking, the debating back and forth, are they really, and actually I have the article in front of me from Garrison, and here's their definition. Cognitive presence is defined as the exploration, construction, resolution, and confirmation of understanding through collaboration and reflection in this community of inquiry. So it's really about the students learning and their processing. So I know that you shared a lot of great ideas with each other. I just want just a couple of groups to share out an idea, and then the rest, all the other reporters, if you could type what you talked about in the chat. So which group wants to share out an idea? And you can raise your hand, use the raise your hand feature. And then everyone else share your ideas in the chat. Not everybody at once. Somebody gonna raise their hand for me? Somebody wanna share something interesting they heard their colleague talk about?
It looks like William Christopher Brown would like to share, Paula.
Okay, go ahead and unmute.
Hi, Maria and I I think we were an interesting pair because I teach English and she teaches math. And I just thought it was interesting in that, we both, the first part of the semester, we have to spend time sort of getting students adjusted to things. It's easy for us to take for granted, is easier than it actually is. So for me, I'm always surprised, though I shouldn't be, that students have some challenges with technology, getting logged in to the different sorts of like email, Canvas, that sort of thing. But using Word is brand new to them, so I try to give them some tips and strategies, like, well, here's how you add the ruler, here's how you change the default for the font, the default for the line spacing. And she was talking, and Maria, she was talking about having to show students how to use the calculator. So they're just, just certain aspects of the math and using that with the calculator that are challenges for students, for her. And, I liked how she said she uses a tablet and a stylus to work out math problems, in an online class. So I thought that was pretty terrific.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And,
you're welcome.
Others, I want to see some more ideas. I want to see some ideas coming. I see a couple of them in chat, but we're going to have one more person share out, and it looks like Hoda is raising her hand.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. In my group, we had Karen and Romaldo and me, and we all talked. Karen is teaching English, and she mentioned that she liked to have asynchronous content, even if the class is being true to the chat. But she would like to have those are, and she also uses her lecture to breaking those are to the chunk of the 7 minutes and asking the students to watch it before and coming to the class and talking about those stuff. And in her school they were using the canvas, and she said because of the limitation of how much material and content she can share, she usually putting a lot of material on the Google Doc and share the link on the canvas and just ask the students. You just need to use nothing but your phone in order to just telling them to get overcome some of those barriers. And in the other hand, Romaldo was using the Flipgrid, and which he was very happy to use that one. And he also asked from his students to create 1 or 2 minute video, and then they can discuss and ask questions while they're meeting virtually. And I'm the one that I believe I just realized today that I'm the most guilty person, that I lecture a lot because I'm also teaching math, and I do use the iPad attached to the MacBook and PDF expert and going through a lot of stuff, and usually I put it as one video, which I would be more than happy to learn more today and hopefully use it in near future for my students.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, many of us do things and don't realize what we're actually doing and the impacts they have on the students and, bandwidth on videos and so forth. We're using Canvas for a shell right now for the Dana Center on a professional learning that we're doing. And we tried to upload videos and we quickly learned Canvas only holds so much. So we had to put our videos in another place and link out to them, just as you stated with the Google Doc. Okay, continue sharing the ideas in the chat. I want you to walk away with a bunch of tools and strategies you can use in your classroom. And also noticed in those breakouts, there were small groups that gives students a chance. I usually try to break my students into groups, so it depends on the concepts, 3 to 4. So they really have that chance for everybody to participate and engage and be a part of that conversation. So thinking about this comfortable online environment, these are just some more strategies that you've already talked about, that you've shared in the chat. Begin with some introduction assignments to help students actually introduce themselves to you and become familiar with the course. Maybe a student profile, maybe a scavenger hunt, which some of you talked about as a syllabus quiz or syllabus review, but the scavenger hunt even can go out to find places such as, how do I get tutoring online? Where do I go for tech support? Bringing those different things together in a virtual environment. And you can actually Google some really good scavenger hunts to embed into your courses. Students introduce themselves in the discussion forum using the synchronous video conference or chat when you can, to help the students interact with each other and introduce each other. And what you might want to do, I put it on the next one, getting to the third dimension, that social presence. Again, think of your social network, actually engaging with each other, engaging with the content, having conversations about conceptual understanding. Think about the students' need for that connectiveness that they need and that belonging that are important for everyone. But additionally, especially with co-rec students, you're adding that layer into the online environment, they need to feel that sense of connection, that sense of belonging, so that they know they actually belong. Can you create a virtual cafe space where they can go and just talk? Do you have a space in your Canvas or your LMS where you can ask questions, where they can ask questions of each other, and you got to make sure you're monitoring that too. but train them to help each other to go on there, ask questions, and post answers to each other. Use some, discussion forums or other collaborative tools to share time management and study skill strategies. And when they're in support groups, try to get them to form. My students actually we did introduction activities the first day of class. They really got to know each other, and they're excited about actually engaging with each other in an online class, that they created a group me. So their support group is a group me. They group me each other. If that's I don't know if group me is a verb, but they use group me to connect with each other, to check on how they're doing, and ask each other questions, homework questions, and encourage them to use that video so they can actually still see the faces in a virtual environment. Maybe you can set up Google Hangout or Google Meet or something like that with them where they can meet. I tell my students in Blackboard that the course shell is always open, that they can go in there and interact with each other. GroupMe is like it's a chat feature where you can put a bunch of, it's an app. Instead of just using chat, it's an app where you have people uploaded, and so you get alerts when the GroupMe comes up. There's, I've had another class that uses, I have to admit, my kids have to teach me a lot of this stuff, but another one of my classes use Instagram to connect with each other in class. They put put a thread of folks on Instagram to connect with, helping each other in class. And if somebody was absent, that was a good thing. Somebody's absent, they would, my online students now, they'll say, "Where are you at?" They send a quick group me message and say, "Where are you at?" Again, creating that sense of belonging, which actually addresses what is really critical, especially with co-recs, those psychosocial factors. We could go into a lot of detail here. There's a lot of research. Carol Dweck does a lot of research on growth mindsets, Bandura, self-efficacy, thinking about the capability, students' capability in class, especially in a math class. But your co-rec students, they often doubt their capability. So these need to be embedded into the courses. The purpose, they need to see a purpose in their class. Do they have see the relevance to their program of study, the relevance and the content to their lives and to their family and their community? Even in a math class, to me, it's easier in an English class because they can just choose discussion prompts and written assignments that reflect their individual interests. And sometimes it's a little bit harder in math. So making sure that you're bringing in some of those contextual situations that are real to them so they can see themselves in that math. And in creating that sense of belonging, even in a virtual environment, in a co-rec, their sense of belonging to the class, having that connection to the institution and to the field at large. I don't know if you can see, you can't see this. So this is actually, we did a workshop out at, we went to Pima College in New Mexico, and we were doing a workshop, and this was a student's artwork that was posted on the wall there. And I don't know if you can, I'm gonna test your eyes. Can you actually read what was written next to it? Well, I don't think you can, but so this is the student's, document or wording that she had next to this image. So I depicted myself in a suit of armor to reflect the way I feel in being at this school. So being at this school, too shy to connect with my peers and not very open about my life outside my studies. The shield raised in front of my body is also a reflection of my stubbornness to open up to people. The tower and castle walls in the background, so imagine that video on the other page, are representative of my school life as well as my work life surrounding me as I do my duty to both each day. So school and work. You may have noticed the dragon in the skies above. I like to think the dragon represents my free spirit and emulates my excitement when it comes to thinking about what's next for me, and what my future could hold. So thinking about that shield, how can we break down that shield, especially in an online environment? How can we create a safe environment where students feel that they can actually open up and have a sense of belonging in your class? very critical to co-rec students. They need a sense of belonging. They need to see a sense of all students actually, but more importantly for co-rec students that feel that they are deemed not worthy. How do you make them feel that they belong to the institution, they belong to the class, and they belong there in that learning environment? And much of that, as you're developing your online classes, you need to develop some strategies, some explicit strategies around helping them learn how the brain works. I often show a brain video at the beginning of class and talk about how your brain can grow. It helps them to actually see the video and the research that the brain can actually grow. What does it mean? Many students don't know what it means to come to class prepared. Um, they don't know how to ask for help and when and how to ask for help. They don't know how to monitor their own learning. And so I want you just in the chat, and I don't want anybody to type just yet. I'm going to do a formative assessment technique here. So in the chat, don't press submit or don't press enter. How do you create community in your class? How do you create that social presence in your class? How can you, how do you, what psychosocial, you can even add psychosocial factors there. So don't press submit. I want everybody to type something in the chat. So I want to see 40 chats, 40 people chat here in just a sec. Don't press submit though. I'm gonna be quiet so you can type. Okay, press submit. By the way, this is a form of formative assessment, an online environment. I don't know about you, but I often look to wait to see what somebody else is typing before I type. Students do that too. If I ask them to put the answer in there, they're waiting until the smart person puts the answer and then they respond too. That's a way to do that formative assessment. If you don't have like clickers and other things in your synchronous class, is have them type the answer and have them don't press submit and have them all submit at once. But again, you have to have that environment that they know it's safe to make mistakes and it's okay to make mistakes and we learn from our mistakes. So there's a wealth of information that you are putting into this chat that you're going to get back later. I'm not going to go through and read all these to you. We're going to provide these to you afterwards. In the brain video, yes, I can provide a link to the, Christy, remind me, I can provide a link to the brain video. But I want to add on to this community, this social teaching, cognitive presence. So this was adapted. You might have seen these videos. This was adapted by Harrison Wood when we did the shift to online. So around all these presences, around social, around teaching, around cognitive presence, you have this equity presence that is foremost top of mind, especially in the virtual environment. So this slide illustrates Harrison Wood's 5 practices for bringing the equity presence into the community of inquiry. So they tell you, and there's a video, there's a link to their recordings if you haven't watched them, they're amazing. You need to, it's your role. We need to be intrusive. We need to be relational. We need to be culturally relevant and affirming. We need to be community minded and we need to be race conscious. We can't pretend we're colorblind in our courses. We need to be race conscious. So they have several videos they've recorded since they've done these beginning ones. And the link is actually in the references at the very end. I can't even do it justice. That you can go and listen to them talk about this equity-minded practice for teaching online. This is a quick reminder because it's top of mind, important. We talked about this one a couple of weeks ago if you were on the webinar. Ben Simone has described the response as educational intelligences in these mental modes, these cognitive frames, bringing it quick to mind again. Our frames often are developed, we acquire them through our education, through our experience, through our family, through our socialization, and they help us with sense making. It's really important because they shape the way we think and the way that we define and solve problems. We need to keep it top of mind that the shifting from, and you'll have this to go back to, shifting from that deficit cognitive frame to that equity cognitive frame. So this also, I wanted to bring this up again. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but this also relates to Harrison Wood, that equity framework. We want to keep in mind, we're not saying the students don't have any responsibility, but we do have the responsibility to ensure that learning environment provides avenues for all the students, each student, to engage and learn in our classrooms. Universal design, we briefly talked about universal design last time. Universal design for learning is a framework to improve, my chat is over the screen, and optimize teaching and learning for all people based on scientific insights into how humans learn. Great framework for online development. There's a URL here, the CAST researchers. They've done a lot of research around this. Many of the resources are actually geared towards K-12, but when you dig into that learning theory, that learning research, it's valid for adult learners as well. I know you can't read this, maybe you can, but I can't read. I have it on my big screen and it's still hard for me to read, but we're going to talk about this on the next slide. And you'll have a link at the end. Again, the references page has a link to a lot of resources for you to go to and explore. So the universal design, we are designing for the edges. We're providing multiple ways that students can access and engage in the content in our class and demonstrate that understanding and mastery. We're providing options. We're talking, sometimes you hear it called different streams for these options. What that means is maybe when you do your video, your welcome video at the beginning of the class, maybe you also have a text version of that too. So are you having multiple means of engagement, multiple streams to help the students engage in your material? So after this session, I want you to think about an assignment or a learning outcome with your students. Usually have challenges around how can you redesign that by adding another stream, maybe adding a video, maybe adding additional text. If it is a video, you have some bulleted text or a note template. Some people, when they do the recorded videos, they make a note template so students fill in. So I'm going to challenge you after this session to look at that. Quick recap. I don't want to rush over this, but I know we're all almost at the end here. We did a lot around teaching and learning in the virtual environment, but it's still so important with our co-rec courses that we keep in mind this comprehensive redesign. Even in a virtual environment, this is math pathways, but some of you are English, it could be guided pathways. You know, make sure your content, your courses are aligned to programs, your co-rec has those embedded psychosocial factors, those student success strategies, those just-in-time supports, you're connecting to the advising. So this is still critical. This comprehensive redesign is still critical in this virtual environment. When you're thinking about your course redesign, you're thinking about that curriculum and pedagogy that's happening in the classroom, even in the virtual environment. We've seen a lot about how we can do active and collaborative learning in an online environment. Your content's relevant. We talked about that. That attention to learning science and psychosocial factors. So this is all important for your course redesign as you're developing your courses for the fall semester, or continuously improving your courses. The content's aligned to the gateway course. You still have that just in time, not just a homework model where they're just going off and doing homework, extra practice. You actually have those embedded just in time supports, so student success strategies embedded along the way. Quick best practices for co-recs that could still be implemented in a virtual environment. Align the content. So this one says intermediate algebra, but this could be integrated reading and writing. Align the content so it's truly just in time and not two separate courses just slammed together. Making sure you provide the sufficient number of hours of support in the virtual environment. If you're not synchronous, it needs to be clear with the students or expectations of being involved in your course. Those need to be upfront and central. What are the participation expectations? What are the timeline? What are the assessments? You know, all of those expectations need to be communicated upfront. Having that structured, we already talked about not having an unstructured homework hour, you know, having that structured content. You know, you're running side by side, you know, side by side course or embedded remediation along the way. Again, not having two courses just slammed together. And you're collecting and you're inspecting your data regularly. Very important for co-requisites, even in an online environment. So just because we're online doesn't make an excuse that your co-recs can be sloppy. It is very critical that we still, and probably even think about the learning environments that are coming from the high schools right now. Our poor students, we don't know what gaps they have from the spring. So we need to have well-designed courses to support our students and meet them where they're at, so that we become, you hear this, the saying all the time, we become that college that's ready for the student. We're not putting the blame on the student. We're designing environments where they can learn and be successful. Thinking about, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but I just thought it was important to bring this back up again. Making sure you're back mapping to define the content. What are the readiness outcomes in your gateway course? What's going to help your underprepared students achieve readiness for their college level course? You're looking at the math and English content, but you're also looking at those student success strategies that you're embedding in the course. Here was an example of a calendar just to show the scaffolding. This is from a statistics course at Roan State. But I just wanted to throw it here again, just to keep in mind the structures of our courses are still important in the online environment. On the online environment, to keep, I keep saying keep in mind. I am so sorry. I keep saying it over and over. I'm stuck on a word and I can't let it go. But are we creating a community? Are we promoting active learning engagement? Are we ensuring inclusivity and access for all our students? Research-based instructional design. I'm giving you a bunch of research at the end of this PowerPoint. Are you addressing the student needs, evaluating your tools? And within your department, are you supporting faculty in the continuous improvement? You're not in this alone. You have the department to work with. Now, this last piece, I don't want to sell, but I just want to let you know, some of you are recognized on the webinar. We do have some virtual professional development opportunities. So FOSI, notice the math term there, focused online collaborative interactions. These promote departmental engagement. I'm going quickly because I'm out of time here. But our strategy is that if you participate, and I'm purposely saying this after this webinar for a reason, because I know some of, and as my Siri on my watch is now trying to talk to me. So when you think about a FOSI, this professional learning series, there's 6 virtual sessions. You meet 2 hours a week, 2 hours each time. It might be I think the ones we have set up for the fall are every week. You get some of the concepts we brought here, you actually get to dig into, practice a little bit, do a little bit of research, you come back together, you learn. So you're scaffolding your learning over time. You're working in small groups. And again, you're digging into the practice. It's actually put into an LMS. I'm just throwing this up here quickly. But if you're in a department where you don't have a lot of support of where you can come together and work on some of these things together, we actually have a learning series that is 12 hours plus in between of effective learning experiences at a distance. So if you're interested, it's not just math, it's any subject. utdanacenter.org, FOSI. That was just a quick plug for some of you who want some additional support. Normally I wouldn't do that, but we're at the end here. So if you have any more questions or comments you want to add, this is the time to open up and ask. I have my email on the next page. If you want to email me any questions, and just to show you quickly, here's all the citations and additional reading you're going to get. I have pages of it here, so you can do your homework there. So pages are resources for you to dig into. I'll go back now. But so any questions or comments that you have, we're right at 2:30, right at time. Thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for bearing with my the breakouts. That's part of this virtual environment, right? We adapt and we're flexible on our feet.